The first thing the stranger said to me was my father's nickname, not his legal name. Not the one on mail. The name only family used, and only before things fell apart. He said it calmly, like we were neighbors catching up. It was raining. The power was out. My phone had no signal. Behind me, my mother was crying in the dark kitchen, and this man stood on the porch like he belonged there. I didn't invite him inside. I stood in the doorway with one hand on the doorframe, blocking the view. He didn't push. He didn't explain. He just looked past me, toward the hallway, and asked if my sister was still breathing evenly. That's when fear settled in, because he wasn't guessing. He knew something he shouldn't. Hours earlier, everything had been normal, dinner half cooked. My sister complaining about a headache, then the lights flickered, the stove shut off, and the house dropped into silence. Storms weren't rare, but this one felt different. The air felt thick. When my sister collapsed in the hallway, I thought it was panic. I was wrong. My mother froze. I remember shaking her shoulders and shouting her name like that would reboot her. My sister's skin felt clammy. Her breathing was shallow, no cell service. Landline dead. We were alone, boxed in by rain and darkness, and I had no idea what to do next. That's when the knock came. Not loud, not urgent, 3 soft taps, like someone unsure they should be there. I almost ignored it. Then another knock, slower this time. I opened the door expecting a neighbor. Instead, there was this man. Mid-40s maybe. Wet jacket. No umbrella, and that calm voice. He asked if we had candles, not if we were okay. Not if we needed help. Candles. I told him no. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer, and asked if my sister had a heart condition. I felt my chest tighten. I told him to leave. He didn't. He said he could help stabilize her until power came back. No badge. No uniform, just a stranger in the rain claiming competence. Every instinct told me to slam the door, but my sister made a sound then, a low, broken noise that didn't sound human. The stranger flinched. That reaction felt real. I let him step inside, just past the threshold. He wiped his boots without being asked. He didn't touch anything. He asked where she was, already moving toward the hallway like he knew the layout. I followed him closely, ready to pull him back. My mother watched from the kitchen, silent, eyes wide. He knelt beside my sister and checked her pulse with practiced ease, not rushed. Not sloppy. He asked about medications. Allergies. Recent stress. I answered automatically, then caught myself. Why was I answering him? He noticed my hesitation and stopped. Your choice, he said. I can leave. I didn't tell him to leave. He showed me how to prop her head. How to slow her breathing, small things, the kind of things you'd learn from experience, not a video. After a few minutes, her breathing eased. My mother sat on the floor and cried quietly. The stranger stepped back like he'd completed a task. He asked to use the phone when the power returned, said he'd wait outside until then. I watched him through the window as he stood under the eaves, soaked and patient. Something about that felt wrong. Most people would have left. He stayed. When the lights flickered back on, he came inside again. He didn't rush to the phone. He looked at a photo on the wall instead, a picture of my father from before the divorce, before the drinking. The stranger smiled faintly and said the nickname. Again, that old, buried name. I demanded answers. He said he knew my father years ago, from a different life, said he owed him something, that he'd been driving nearby when the outage hit and recognized the house. I didn't believe him. It sounded stitched together, convenient. Here's the part where I thought I understood everything. He admitted he'd been watching the house for weeks, not stalking, he said. Waiting. He knew my sister's condition. Knew about the divorce, said my father had asked him to keep an eye on us. My blood went cold. That wasn't protection, that was surveillance. I told him to leave immediately. My mother backed me up. He didn't argue. He wrote a number on a scrap of paper and placed it on the table. For emergencies, he said. Then he walked into the rain without another word. I locked the door and slid down against it, shaking. That night, I barely slept. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every headlight felt like him returning. I replayed everything he'd said, searching for holes. In the morning, my sister was stable. The hospital confirmed we'd avoided something serious. They asked who'd helped her before the ambulance arrived. I didn't know what to say. Days passed. Nothing happened. No calls. No sightings. I almost convinced myself it had been a coincidence layered with fear. Then a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of an old document with my father's signature, and a note that read, "He didn't tell you everything." The document was dated decades ago, before I was born. It wasn't a will, it wasn't a contract, it was a consent form, medical. My father had agreed to something irreversible, something he'd never mentioned, and the stranger's name was listed as a witness. I confronted my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. He didn't deny it. He said he'd been young. Desperate. He said he'd tried to forget. The stranger hadn't been a friend, he'd been a beneficiary, someone whose life depended on my father's choice. That's when the story shifted again. The stranger wasn't watching us for my father, he was watching because of my sister, because her condition mirrored his own from years earlier, because the procedure my father consented to had saved him, and now, without knowing it, my sister was following the same path. He'd recognized the signs, the breathing, the collapse. He'd stayed nearby in case it happened, not out of obligation, out of gratitude, but he'd never planned to explain that. He'd promised my father he wouldn't interfere unless it was necessary. I called the number he'd left. He answered on the second ring, didn't sound surprised. I asked why he hadn't told us the truth. There was a long pause. Then he said he didn't want to be seen as someone collecting a debt. He just wanted to repay one. Here's the part one still struggle with. He'd crossed lines, he'd watched our home, learned our routines, inserted himself into our worst moment, and he'd saved my sister's life. Both things were true. I didn't know how to hold them at the same time. We met once after that, in a public place. He kept his distance, answered my questions without defending himself. When I asked if he would have stepped in even if we told him to leave, he nodded, said some debts don't wait for permission. My mother refuses to talk about him. My father avoids the subject entirely. My sister knows only that a stranger helped her breathe through the dark. She calls him an angel. I don't correct her. I don't know what he is. Sometimes I replay that first moment on the porch, the rain, the nickname, the calm voice that felt wrong until it felt necessary. I wonder what I would have done if I'd trusted my fear instead of my instinct to act. I wonder if gratitude can exist without forgiveness. He hasn't contacted us again. He said he wouldn't, said his part was finished, but I still notice unfamiliar cars sometimes. I still feel that flicker of suspicion, and then I remember my sister's breathing evening out under his guidance. I don't know if what he did was right. I don't know if I would have done the same. He took away our sense of safety to preserve our lives. Is that a fair trade? I honestly don't know. If someone saves your family by crossing boundaries you never agreed to, do you thank them, or do you hold them accountable? Can you do both without betraying yourself? I still have the scrap of paper with his number. I've never used it again. I don't know if keeping it makes me cautious or complicit. All I know is that during our worst night, a stranger stepped into the dark for us, and I'm still deciding what that means.